All right, welcome everybody. I think what we wanted to cover this meeting to start with was a little bit about, and I apologize, Mr. Chambers has gotten tied up. He was going to do this portion, and there's some crazy bills that were up for votes today, and they needed some guidance. So I'm going to stand in here and. We're going to cover a couple of topics first to start off the meeting. And when we create a bond referendum, the referendum part is the balloting or the election of the voters of the district. And so one of the things that you guys are creating is this list of needs and projects that are going to be part of this referendum. And then in the past, typically, the statutes have dedicated one ballot measure for that bond referendum, no matter what the projects were, yes, on a given ballot in the election, that you could hold a bond election. Changes have been made to the law over time, but in the last legislative session, the 86th legislative session 2 years ago, some lingo was added to the law that specifies how ballots are constructed for bond referendums in particular. And I want to first just kind of read this to you, just so you have an idea of what this means. In the past, ALEAF has had bond referendums that were for a certain dollar amount. For instance, in the 2015 referendum, it was $341 million. And it was for school buildings, land, school buses, technology, security improvements, all of those items that were on the list in generalities of what those were. And then there was information put out by the district of what that comprised, that $341 million comprised of, and what taxes to expect on over the course of the referendum to pay for those items. In the 2006 legislative session, the legislature came in and said, we want to make school districts ask specifically, separately, for certain items on a ballot. And so you can no longer put all of the things on one question or one proposition. And so this is the way it has to be constructed now. Any bonds that are for the construction, acquisition, which means we're purchasing a building, equipment of school buildings in the district, the purchase of new school buses, the purchase of necessary sites or land, or for school buildings, may be submitted to the voters in one proposition, except bonds for the following purposes must be in separate propositions, okay? So these are the things that have to be in their own standalone ask or question of the voter. Construction, acquisition, or equipment of a stadium with seating capacity for more than 1,000 spectators. So if we were going to build a new stadium, that would have to be on its own proposition. If we're going to equip a stadium that has a seating capacity of more than 1,000, which equip could mean anything. It could mean replacing equipment, replacing portions of it, modifying it. Then that would have to be on its standalone proposition. The second one is construction, acquisition, or equipment of a natatorium. So far, we don't have a natatorium on our list, but if we did, then that would be a standalone proposition for any of the natatoriums that we would be proposing. The third is construction, acquisition, or of equipment of another recreational facility other than a gymnasium, playground, or play area. That could be a lot of different things. We don't, as far as I can tell, we don't have anything on here other than we've talked about potentially some turf replacements and other recreational facilities, which are A-Leaf Field and maybe the baseball fields. We'll see what's on the list in the end, but they could fall into that item. The fourth thing that has to be separated is construction, acquisition, or equipment of a performing arts facility. We talked about a performing arts facility in the last referendum, and it was combined into what we called a multi-purpose center, which is now the Center for Talent Development. But we don't have that in this particular referendum thus far that we've been talking about. The fifth one is construction, acquisition, or equipment of housing for teachers. Well, we're not building any housing for teachers because we don't have sufficient enough teachers, but there are some districts out in West Texas and so forth that have engaged in selling bonds to build apartment complexes and dormitory style living. And the sixth one is an acquisition or update of technology equipment other than equipment used for school security purposes or technology infrastructure integral to the construction of a facility. So for instance, if we were building a new building and it had cameras and security devices and networks that supported that, that would be included in the construction of a new facility. But if it's updating technology or equipment in school buildings that are already in existence, technology would be on its own standalone proposition. And so the way that would look would be on a ballot, instead of having what typically we'll have on a November ballot, we'll have in odd numbered years, we'll have a couple of either 3 or 4 of our board members on the ballot. We'll also have in this particular November, should the board call the election, we would have propositions from this referendum, from the work that you guys are doing right now. And the projects that you come up with in the end that you think that the committee's recommending to the board to call an election for would be gathered together or clustered together into propositions or individual questions, and those would be on the ballot as well. So in the given ballot that would happen in November, there may be some county measures, there may be some city measures if you live in the city limits, there may be mud districts with measures on there. There will be typically a school board election in an odd number year. In some districts it's in May, but in A-Leaf it's in odd numbered years, November elections. And then any bond elections for those same entities that they're authorized to put on the ballot. And so in the A-Leaf ballot, we would see, like, for instance, in this coming November, it would be 4 board seats along with a number of propositions for a bond referendum. So when we work in a group setting like this, in a steering committee, and come up with the needs that the committee feels that we want to recommend to the board to call an election for, should the board call the election, those will be formulated together in propositions by an attorney. An attorney, I'm not an attorney, and I don't purport to be one, but I can read the statutes, and typically we have an attorney called a specific kind of attorney called a bond counsel. And our firm that we use is Andrews Kurth. They're here in Houston. And what we will do is take the list of items that the steering committee comes up with as the final list. And before we take it to the board, with the bond counsel will take those items and cluster them together in the right propositions that meets the statute, so that we don't ask the voters improperly in the referendum, so that when the board calls an election, it will be called with proposition 1, 2, 3, or A, B, C, D, and broken down for those projects, and one of which, as you heard in the end, one of which will be related to an athletic facility if it's Crump Stadium, because it seats more than 1,000. And another will be a generalized one that will be new buildings, construction, renovation of existing buildings. And there will be a standalone one for technology, because as you heard Pam Lowe and Wally and Jeff Alsbury talk about the technology needs, should the committee leave those on there as a part of the list, then the voters will be asked separately. Here's the upside. The upside is it's clear, it's concise for voters who care and want to vote. The downside is that you may have people that go to vote one way or another on the main referendum and choose not to participate in the others. And so you may have your main referendum pass, and then your technology doesn't even get a glance from a lot of the voters because they've got ballot fatigue. They really wanted to vote up or down on the main one. So what districts have done around the state, I think, since this has been passed, is make sure their community really understands that the intention of the referendum is for all propositions as part of equal importance to the passage. And so if you have to basically instruct voters of what it means when they say yes or no to just one or several, but they don't vote on all of them. We can't do that as a district that's offering. All we can do is put the information out for the voters and represent what's going to be on the ballot. We'll have to put out a sample ballot on our website and all, and it'll be up to the community and those who want to see things pass to communicate to the rest of the community about the importance of the breakdown of those propositions and how they need to pass in order for the district and the steering committee work to occur as they proposed. So that's kind of the lay of the land now from this point forward. Once the committee comes up with the final list and what they want to recommend to the board for a bond, and you'll hear Michelle say a bond, and it's really the bond is the group or the entirety of all of it, and it's all those projects that you feel are worthy to go forward before the voters and that you think the community will support, and then the board would adopt that at the next election of their choosing, and then the propositions would be placed on a ballot, and we join in the elections of the county. So Harris County actually operates the election, and we don't operate the machines or anything anymore. It's all joint elections. So in and amongst everything else, like I said, city, county, MUD districts and all that would be a section for A-Leaf. And anybody that was registered to vote in A-Leaf, when they go up to a machine and they put in their code that they get on the little piece of paper, their ballot code, it pulls up the ballot for them because they live in A-Leaf. It would include the measures on the A-Leaf bond referendum for them to vote up, down, or for or against, and obviously you can vote neither, which is leaving it blank, and that's an undervote. So hopefully that didn't muddy it up too much, but I want to just kind of go over this last May election. Across the state of Texas, we had a phenomenal passage rate of bonds by school districts. The voters really turned out coming out of COVID and supporting school districts. Katy ISD, next west of us, had a bond with 4 propositions on it. The first one was the main one with all new schools and renovations, and it was $591 million. They had a second proposition, which was technology, and it was 59.7 million. And a third proposition was a new natatorium for their high school, number 10, with 13.8 million. And the final proposition was campus and district athletic facilities, stadiums, repairs, and component replacements. So they lumped it together at 11.2 million. So the voters could pick any one of those four or none. And that's, like I said, that's the downside, is that it splits the votes. And so you don't have an equal number usually of people voting. But theirs passed, and across the state, even with this new statute in place, the voters across Texas passed overwhelmingly. I don't know the exact number, but it was like over 90% of the referendums passed, which is uplifting to know that going into this. I think the communities across the state realize where school districts are trying to do what they can to better the facilities for their kids. So.
Thank you, Charles. I appreciate that. And I think you clarified the proposition question for everybody. Ed, do you have something that you would like to say to the committee before we get started on the meat?
Yeah, so thanks, Charles, for that education. That was very, very good information. So happy Thursday, everybody. I'm coming to you from my satellite office, which is by car. I am multitasking today, so I hope you guys can hear and see me okay. But I just really want to thank you again for your valuable time. I was just thinking about all the work you've done so far. And the amazing thing is that how you are and will impact the lives of so many young folks. You know, years from now, you would have been responsible for the next generation of doctors and lawyers and scientists and truck drivers and electricians and coaches. And the list just goes on and on and on. So I just want to thank you for impacting their lives. You've had to make some big decisions over the past several weeks. And now you'll start to prioritize and make even bigger decisions. So thank you for your commitment to this work. And I'm excited about what you'll come up with today. And just thank you guys again for carving out the time to be a part of this process.
Thank you, Ed. Kim and I are going to share just a few minutes. We're not going to belabor anything, but for me and the housekeeping piece of it, I think this is a really good time to remind you, it's really awkward for us on Zoom because we don't have that magic of human interaction and synergy that comes when we can passionately share our ideas and look each other right in the face. I just miss those days and hope they come back soon, especially for bond committees. But this is a really good time to remind you, as one of your ground rules, to purposefully think holistically about this work that you're doing. I know everybody has a particular piece of A-Leaf ISD that they love and that they support, and particular needs of certain students or a campus that you're connected to at the heart. And so I realize that it takes an intentional setting aside sometime of our personal agendas for the good of the whole district. And that's one of the things that makes a very successful bond, is if the committee sees themselves as a team who we're working together, just like we did in 2015. We're working together to make A-Leaf ISD the very best that it can be, and competitive in this environment and with all of the districts that surround you. So that's all I wanted to say. I wanted to remind you again, what I have to say is that no one on this committee, including me, including Ed, including Mr. Chambers, Mr. Woods, there's no one on this committee who's going to get everything they want. But I guarantee that everyone on the committee is going to get something that they want. I've never had a committee where somebody said this entire bond is not what I wanted. So let's keep that in mind and put that as an umbrella for all of our wanted to say.
I really don't have anything to say other than if you have problems with the Zoom breakout rooms when we send you, please just hold on and we're going to get you assigned and we will work through the list.
Well, I'll take Kim's time then and remind you of two things. One, I'm not going to have you go there, but on slides number, I'm not sure where they are, maybe 8 and 9. One is your decision-making model. I'll remind you of that because on June 10th, you're going to begin to actually make decisions about a large number of projects that have been presented to you. And we'll use that decision-making model. So if you will, please become familiar with that. I'll talk to you about that before you start to deliberate on your June 10th meeting. And then the next slide is your priorities. And I'll remind you as a committee that these priorities were used by the district to determine what projects to present to you. These are the district's priorities based on the professionals that work in fine arts and athletics and digital learning and facilities assessment and the architects. These are our best collaborative priorities that we've come up with. But I will have to say that it is the prerogative of the committee to change priorities on this list and to put a priority 3 into the bond above a priority 1. So the committee has a lot of leeway with the selection of the projects that they select. So I wanted to remind you of those. We're going to have a fairly, not extensive, but a good, clear review of our last meeting when we talked about the facilities assessment. That's like a big chunk of money for this bond. And the new construction as well is included. And then the smart classrooms that Pam Lowe talked to you about. So I've asked them to give you a very clear synopsis of what was it that they talked about at the last meeting. So Steve, are you going to start?
I certainly can.
Let's hear it.
We go to the next slide. So yes, just wanted to give you a quick recap of our last meeting. When we're looking at the new construction, our new construction summary, we talked about a Ewens Elementary School major renovation, and that's about $37 million. We looked at a Chambers Elementary School replacement school on the same site, and that's about $42 million. We also looked at a Crump Stadium press box addition and renovation at about $6.5 million. You may see later on, you'll see a breakout of all the projects with a large spreadsheet. That Crump Stadium project will actually be moved to the athletics portion of the project, which Mr. Woods touched on a little bit. We also have the front entry canopies at $4.5 million. That's at the elementary schools. And then we have an Ag Science Center at about $6.5 million. That we had as a priority 2. And I know there was some votes to make that a priority 1. So we'll see where that goes. But that's a real high level review of where we were last time. So yeah, continue to the next one. I think Kim.
Oh, it's Pam, I think.
Pam, I'm sorry.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for this time to review the classrooms of the future. So the first thing we had were interactive boards for all Alief ISD classrooms and libraries. We said that we wanted our students to be competitive with other districts, and we know that these interactive boards are standard set of equipment in many districts. So we want to bring our district up to the same standard. So an interactive board for all classrooms and a replacement cycle for those boards would be $24 million. The second thing was updated bookcases and furniture for all Alief ISD libraries. Remember, we'd already started on this path to update and kind of refresh our furniture, but we want to continue that for all of our libraries, and that was at a price tag of $1.5 million. And then finally, the sound amplification systems in all Alief ISD classrooms. And this is the area that I received the most questions about in terms of what is this, why is it needed, and how is it going to benefit our students? So that just shows that I didn't do a very good job on the first pass of explaining what those systems are. So I'll take just a moment to clarify. Audio sound systems or amplification systems in classrooms really help the teacher or the speaker project their voice over background noise. The teacher wears a lightweight wireless microphone and transmits his or her voice through a signal through a receiver or an amplifier that is either installed in the ceiling or is standing or sitting somewhere in the classroom, and it's portable. The voice is then amplified through these sound speakers and distributed evenly throughout the classroom. And our real goal here is to really think about the classroom of the future. And in that classroom of the future, every student should clearly hear every word from anywhere in the classroom, regardless of where the speaker is standing, and regardless of if the student is face-to-face or virtual. So those sound amplification systems are at a price tag of $16.5 million, and that includes the initial install as well as the replacement after 6 or 7 years, and that's a priority too. You asked for more research, and that is also located on the Bond website. There are 3 articles that go more into the research on how this impacts student achievement and student learning, and more information from the American Speech and Language and Hearing Society, which talks about the benefits of sound amplification systems in classrooms.
Thank you, Pam. Very good review of that. Jeff, are you on? Jeff or Glenn, are you on now?
Yes.
And would you like to, there were some changes, I believe, in the priorities or in the projects. Some projects that were presented are not going to be on the list. Did you want to address that now or explain that?
Steve is going to start through this section of it, and I'm going to add some stuff in a few more slides.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, Steve.
But
I
Michelle,
thought you were through and I was panicking here.
But Michelle, I want to add just a few, let's hear a moment. Just this presentation looks a little bit different. It's not a summary slide because we did make some, we prioritized a little bit differently and group projects differently. So, and because there was so much information, we felt like it was important to kind of update it and review it a little more in depth. So go ahead, Steve.
Okay, with that, if we can go to the next slide. And then next slide, we'll look at an overview. This is a slide that we looked at last time, but just a recap that the district does maintain over 60 facilities and about, over 6.5 million square feet. We're looking at 45,000 students in the district, and a number of those facilities are aging. Over, 14 facilities over 20 years old. We have, what would that be? 17 facilities over 40 years old, with 3 of those being over 50 years old. So we have some aging facilities. It really speaks highly of the district and the maintenance that they've done on these buildings, of maintaining those buildings. When you have 45,000 students running through those buildings daily, and to maintain them in the high quality state that they're in, it really says a lot for the district and the way that these buildings have been maintained. But they are aging. You know, there is a certain point in time where you're looking at those facilities and trying to keep up with everything. There's some major items that need to be replaced over time. So we can go to the next slide. So as we talked about before, the items that we looked at with with engineers, ourselves, walking every building, we're looking at the site, the exterior, interior, roofing, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and technology. And I'm going to take 1 second to talk about the things we're not putting into this facility assessment. And that's some just miscellaneous maintenance items, some miscellaneous painting. There's a lot of maintenance type projects in the district that don't really fall into the category of a bond package. Just the everyday maintenance of those facilities. These are more major and significant on these buildings. You can see on the right is just a standard building needs assessment. We're looking at interior, exterior, carpet replacement, heat pump, boilers, roof replacement, a lot of different items in those schools. If we can go to the next slide. Jeff, do you want to talk a little bit about the priorities and what we did and modified a little bit on this one?
Thanks, Steve. Good evening, everyone. Last time we talked about critical replacements, life cycle costs, life cycle lives, end of life replacements. I spoke a little bit about how you can't wait till the very last minute to replace things. And so many of our systems throughout the district are set up on certain number of years of replacement. They could go a little longer, could go a little shorter sometimes, but we set them up, and that's how we judge when we're going to go ahead and do these. So as we've completed that list, many of these items are all priority ones because they are code replacements, they are critical replacements, things like that. However, everything can't be a priority one, so we broke them out into priority 1s and 2s. And then we've got some other items that need to be done, but they can wait a few years. They're not falling apart. We can put some Band-Aids on them and they'll be fine. And so we put those into 3s. So there were a lot of items in the prior, when you last saw this that did not have the years placed to them. So we put all those years in, and that caused a little bit of shuffling around with the priorities. The priorities that the district and Michelle and everybody has established, the 1, 2s, and 3s don't always perfectly fit these maintenance type replacement cycle projects. So we made a very minor change in that on our priority 2s, we define those as years 4 to 7 instead of years 4 to 6. This just helped us be able to group these in a little bit better. So as you can see, many items on the priority 1 list are also on the priority 2 list. We still have those mechanical, electrical, plumbing replacements. This would also include some roofs and some carpet that don't show up here, but they are grouped in there now. And then the last one, priority 3, are some things, like I mentioned, that are not necessarily on a life cycle replacement. We replace them as we see that they are failing and need to be taken care of, or that we can no longer continue to patch them and maintain them. So I just wanted to explain that we have, our assessment goes out for 10 years, but we've broken these down into the priority 1, 2, and 3s after we assigned actual years of where they fell and made that minor adjustment to our priority 2 years. And I think that got it covered.
All right. So with that, we do have the priority 1, priority 2, priority 3. This slide, you can see the campuses that are affected by each priority, a significant number of campuses across the district on all of those different categories that we talked about. And looking at each year,
that
the
young
3
lady
years.
one that owns the business?
This is
May I ask, just
ahead.
a moment, Jeff, may I ask everyone on the committee, if you're not speaking, to please mute? I think Craig's able to mute everyone too, but we're getting some feedback from somewhere. I'm sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
The state, but yes, so the priority 1, which is the 1 to 3 years, we're looking at 85, 386, 847, so about $85 million. The priority 2, we're looking at 107,686. And the priority 3 is about $75 million. And Craig, do you have the opportunity to pull up that spreadsheet for a second? I just want to kind of scroll through that. Not gonna really tie in on any particular item, but just want to see that we have the ability to sort this priority spreadsheet by year, by priority, by campus. We've sorted it by year in this case. If you scroll down a little bit, keep going to the next page, you can see that we've kind of totaled it up. That would be the total for year 2022. You can keep going down and see a total for year 2023, et cetera. So we have looked at all the different elements that have to do, and you can almost just see a repeating theme on the entire district having to do with vinyl wall covering, fire replacements, mechanical systems, roofing, carpet. Those are the major items that end up needing to be replaced over time in a campus. So Greg, I think we can turn back to the slideshow. So if we go to the next slide, it's just another, oh, yeah, go ahead to the next slide. Oh, sorry, go back one. It was a duplicate, go back one more. So this slide I wanted to point out, there was a question in one of the meetings that was talking about construction cost versus project cost. So I did want you to see that a construction cost is the cost for a contractor to come out there and do that project. That's what you pay the construction company, the construction contractor. And that's what we look at with our engineers and the historical data on evaluating what is that probable cost that a contractor will charge to come and do that project. On top of the construction cost, you do have the what we call the soft cost. And those soft costs are permitting, testing, engineering fees, surveying, all of the different elements that go into putting a project together and putting it on the street, advertising, putting it in for public bids. All of those numbers get on top of the project or on the construction cost, which make it a project cost with those soft costs. And I might point out too that these project costs and soft costs, we have not put in any inflation on these numbers yet, because we're not looking right now. We don't know the length of the bond. The committee hasn't really decided what all is in this. So we took a strategic stance to say, we're going to look at today's construction dollars. And once we get some of that figured out, we will be looking at that inflation cost to make sure that we have enough money in the bond to cover the projects that are promised the voters. So with that, we can go to that next slide, Craig. And that again is just, this next slide is just a summary again, same repeat slide as before, of the different priorities and the different project cost per priority. So with that, I think that's the last slide on that.
Thank you, Steve. I wanted to make sure we didn't focus on this, but sometimes as a community member or as a committee member, you're looking at people that you don't know, and I know them, but I don't want to make the assumption that you do as well. Steve Alloway is a partner with Huckabee, and Huckabee is an architect who has done multiple school K-12 projects across the state. So that's why Steve can speak so eloquently about the facilities assessment. And also you heard from Jeff Delisle, and Jeff is with the district. He's a district professional, and he is the director of maintenance. So that's why he knows your buildings inside and out, because he's walked all of them, and Steve has as well, and actually put their eyes on all of these projects that they are proposing. So I wanted to make sure the committee was aware of who was talking to them. We're doing really well because we're running a little bit ahead, and that's a good thing, because that just means that I can give you more time when you do your breakout rooms, and I know you like that. So now we're going to begin with a piece of the puzzle that you've been waiting to hear probably since meeting 2, when you started asking how much does this cost and how much is everything going to total and can we afford that? Before we part of my process is not to talk about affordability until we're through presenting all of our projects. And that's because if we started telling you that our capacity and what we could afford, you would think only in terms of how much is in your wallet. And we want you instead to think about the needs of the students and the priorities of the district. So we're going to find out today in our reality check, not a reality show, a reality check piece of our puzzle. We're going to find out we want it all, we can't afford it all. We want everything, we may not be able to afford everything. And so we have to make sure that our bond referendum that we come up with meets the criteria of successful bonds. And a couple of those criteria include making sure that it's financially a good stewardship. And the other piece that we can only project because we don't have any data on that, how much will our community stomach? What will they approve? Because we don't want to do all this work and have our bond not approved by our community. So that's why your piece of this, you represent that community. And we found research actually shows that you have an innate knowledge, are predicting we want to keep that in mind as we talk about the capacity. So now for our reality check, and Deanna, this may not make you the most important, the most well-liked person, presenter tonight, but Deanna Wentz is well-liked by me. She is the Assistant Superintendent of Finance. Deanna, while Deanna's talking, I'm going to change rooms. I understand my connection is bad.
All right, sounds like a good plan. And
Deanna,
can you hear me? Okay, I see Hilda's shaking her head, so I will proceed. I wanted to start off first with just an overview again of the two pieces of our tax rate. We have the general fund tax rate, or the maintenance and operations rate, that funds the vast majority of our district operations. So that's teacher salaries, our utility bills, minor repairs, campus supplies. The vast majority of our budget is funded through the M&O tax rate and state funding. On the debt service side, we have what's called the interest and sinking, or the INS rate. And the revenue generated from these two pieces of the tax rate is tracked completely separately. And the revenue generated from that INS rate can only be used to repay debt after it is issued, once it's approved by our voters. So moving to the next slide. Our tax rate is very low in comparison to neighboring districts. You can see here the two pieces, and that the M&O rate is about $1. That's slightly higher than the average, but close to the average. And the debt service rate is about 20 cents for a total tax rate of $1.20, which is 12 cents lower than the average for the Region 4 area, and the second lowest in this group of schools. So taking that tax rate, and what does that really mean? Well, when we generate the tax bills that we send out to every taxpayer in our district, and that includes commercial property like office buildings, as well as all the apartment buildings, and of course the homes in our district, That tax bill is based on two things. The first is the property value of that specific property, and the second is the tax rate. So right now, the average taxable value of a home in Alief is about $148,000. You divide that by 100 because our taxes are assessed per $100 worth of value, multiply it by the tax rate, and taxes due for the average home are about $1,800. That's about $150 per month. So again, it's just the two pieces, and that's going to be different for every taxpayer in the district depending on their particular property value. So on the next slide, we'll look a little bit at our tax rate history over time. And I always like to go back clear to 2005-06 when our tax rate was $1.72 and show how much lower it is now than it was back then. So most of the changes in our tax rate have really been due to that other side, the one that we're not particularly concerned about as part of this committee discussion that funds our general fund operations. Various changes in the law have required compression in that tax rate. We had a tax ratification election in 08-09 that increased it. And then once again, starting in 1920, we've got tax rate compression passed by the legislature that has reduced that rate. The debt service rate has remained somewhat stable from 22 cents here, going back to when we had our last bond referendum. The rate then was 15.5 cents, and our current rate has remained unchanged for the last 3 years. We anticipate adopting a flat tax rate again for the next fiscal year, and the rate will remain at 20.5 cents based on current assumptions. So on the next slide, the other piece besides the tax rate, again, is our property value, and that has increased significantly over the last 10 years. Right now, we're $18.1 billion. That's based on the certified estimate that we received from HCAT at the beginning of this month. For 21-22, our value increase was only 1.74%. So that was slightly lower than what we had anticipated. About 39% of our tax base is in homes, and the average property value increase for homes was about 6.5%, but the 50% of our property value is in office buildings and apartments, and they were down about 1%. So overall, it's a very modest increase in property values projected for 21-22 of less than 2%. So then moving to the next slide. Quick refresh on the 2015 referendum. At this point in the process and working with the committee, I was developing some of the same scenarios that you'll see on the next few slides that we're working on for this referendum. But at that point, our tax rate again was 15.5 cents. We projected that we'd need an increase of 8.5 cents. Actually, because mainly of higher property value growth than what we were projecting, that tax rate increase has been 5 cents. So once again, if we don't need the additional pennies on the tax rate to fund the debt that we're issuing, we don't increase that tax rate. So if the property value is coming in higher than we had anticipated and we don't need to increase the rate, that kind of limits the changes in that rate. That's kind of a good track record going into this new referendum. So then moving to the next slide, what do things look like now for this referendum? As Steve had mentioned when he was presenting, all of the costs that the committee is looking at are current dollar costs, what it would cost to do that project right now. So this will be further defined as we schedule out projects into various years, but we've made some assumptions already on inflationary costs. So for example, a building that would cost us $45 million to build right now, we would anticipate that would cost about $58 million to build in 26-27. So the numbers really that the committee needs to focus on is that current dollar cost. We kind of take care of the rest of the calculations after that. So if we were to narrow our project list down to about $294 million, we would maintain a flat tax rate over the course of the 7 years and be able to fund $294 million worth of projects. So we do have to point out that we're not saying that everyone's tax bill would remain flat. Again, it's that property value and tax rate that influence that. So we are projecting increases in property value over the course of those 7 years. But overall, the tax rate could remain flat and we could we could fund projects of $294 million. So on the next slide, to look at some other options, and this is kind of what I'm calling the middle of the road option. This would be a 4-cent tax increase over the course of the next 7 years. So we wouldn't immediately increase the rate by 4 cents. You can see there's a penny increase in the second year of the referendum, another penny increase in 24-25, and then pennies going forward to get us to 4 cents over the course of 7 years. We could approve projects of about $425 million. The impact of that 4-cent increase on the average taxable value of a home in Alief would be about $60,000 per year or $5 per month. So each penny of taxes impacts the taxpayer by about 15 cents. So that's how we do those calculations. So there would also be changes in the annual tax bill due to property value changes. So then to look at a final option, and this one is kind of based on what would happen if the committee decided to do every single project. How much would that cost? So this would be about $536 million in projects, would require a tax rate increase of about 9 cents. The effect on the average taxpayer due to that rate increase alone would be $135 a year or $11 per month. So these numbers will definitely be revised and refined over the next month as we kind of juggle projects around from year to year and apply some more precise, perhaps inflation factors, relook at our property value estimates and the interest rate estimates for what we expect to pay on the debt. And, you know, we have to have a crystal ball that goes out quite a ways in time, and a lot of assumptions go into this. But as you can see previously, we were fairly close in the impact on our taxpayers when they approved the debt previously. And hopefully these numbers kind of give the committee some general parameters of what we can afford and what we can reasonably recommend to our taxpayers for this referendum. And I'm sure there's lots of differences of opinion also on what's reasonable and what's affordable. So those are all things we'll need to hash out as we finalize kind of that project list and the effects of that. So that is it for me.
Thank you, Deanna. As you may be able to tell, I was having technical difficulties and I don't have any support here. So I just had to gather everything together and move to another room. So I don't know how much of what I said that you actually heard before Deanna talked, and or if I was talking to myself. We'll never know that. But we're going to move on from here. You're going to have a really good opportunity to ask questions. And I know that that Deanna's presentation raised some questions that you would like to ask her. But we're going to we're going to send you into your work groups in just a moment. And in those work groups, you will be able to call your expert to the group. keep in mind, we have 9 groups. So if everyone's calling for Deanna, you may have to wait for a little while, but we'll try to get her to everybody that's asking. But you may have questions of Mr. Alloway or Mr. Delisle or Mr. Jarrett about the facilities. You may have questions about the smart classrooms for Pam. So you can call those experts into your room, and through the magic of Zoom that wasn't so magic at my house tonight, we can send those people to your rooms to have a discussion with you. Remember that you have a facilitator in your room. Those facilitators are not leaders. In fact, the hardest job that they have is to remain neutral to the content of your discussion. I like to quote Craig, who said that they were encouraging your dialogue without influencing your discussions or your decisions. So we don't want you to feel led in any way, but we do want to make the best use of your time by the facilitators. So any question after your several minutes of you'll have at least 40 minutes to talk. You also have a worksheet. Hilda, would you like to explain that worksheet that they got today from Craig? Maybe they got 2 copies of it because it was revised. We are in real time, people. We are organic and making changes to make everything as accurate as possible for your work. So Hilda, do you want to talk about that, that worksheet briefly?
Sure. Thanks, Michelle. And thanks, Deanna. Yes, you were sent a worksheet earlier this morning, and then you were sent a revised worksheet because, as Michelle said, we found some mistakes and we changed them and changed up the numbers just a bit. But you know, this worksheet will show you, or it's labeled a combined totals bond worksheet. It will be handy for you to have, whether you have a copy of it or you're looking at it on your screen as you're talking to your facilitators. Facilitators, you want to make sure you have the most recent one, which is the one that has a grand total of 539 million. So that's the one that you want. It's also it was sent to you later on, and as well, it's in the Google folder that Kim has for you. But basically, committee members, this has every item that was presented to you in our meetings, broken into or by department with cost per priority and by department. So basically you have your athletics items that are presented by priority, and then they're totaled out by priorities. And then they have a total for all of athletics. So it's easily, you can see that priority 1 for athletics is about 11.9 million, priority 2, 5.6, and priority 3, 5.3, for a total of about 22.9 million. And so as you move through this, you'll see that each presentation is again repeated, like technology. It's broken down by priorities. If you'll move on, Craig, just kind of scroll down a bit. You can see that there's transportation as well. Safety and security, instruction. Your building needs facility looks a little bit different because we broke them out by the types of projects that were listed by site, by exterior projects, interior, roofing, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. But again, we totaled out each one. So you also have it broken down by priority and totaled out for the total package for the facilities assessment. And then it ends with the new construction and the rebuilds. And then you have your combined totals at the very bottom of the page for priority 1, which is reading about 317 million. For priority 2, 124 million. For priority 3, 98 million, for a grand total of 539 million, which is a little bit off from what Deanna presented to you because I made those changes kind of later in the day. So, but in the ballpark range.
I-
Also, just to let you know, in athletics, I did move, as Steve said, we moved the Crump Stadium press backs back into the athletics priorities. So that's where they're located.
Thanks, Hilda. Now, lest you're beginning to panic at the amount of information that's included on this worksheet, tonight, you're just discussing from 30,000 feet tonight. I don't want you to think that you have to make decisions tonight. That's not your role in your work groups for tonight. You're going to be making, giving your opinions and talking to one another and having dialogue about what you think is the best possible course for us. There are about 60 something lines on the items on this project list. Those are the items you're going to be making decisions on June 10th. You're going to yes and no that, but don't get worried about that either, because they're broken down into priorities. And your group, I'm so used to saying tables because I'm used to actually working in a real room with real faces in front of me, but in your work groups, you may decide on June 10th, we want all the priority ones. So I don't want you to worry about having to go through this list item by item, although you'll be doing that at home as part of your homework. So don't worry about making decisions on each item. You may have questions about some of the projects that are listed that you've already heard about. And in that case, go on and call one of those experts into your work group and ask them those questions. Don't let any question be unanswered. We will have a little bit of time, about 30 minutes at the end, for you to come back together as a big group. And at that point, you can either ask a question or your group can just give us an opinion or some feedback. You can say anything to this large group if you'll just keep it pithy and short so that we have time for all 9 of our groups. So at this point, Kim, how about sending us into our work groups? I loved listening to your discussion. It was varied. I found that groups were talking about a variety of things, but they weren't the same thing. So that's very healthy, and we'll hear from you right now. Let's just start with table 8, Nikki's table.
Yes, from the great debaters, we're
The
gonna
great
have
debaters, yes.
Dave is gonna speak for us today.
Thank you, Nikki. I've drawn the short straw 2 times in a row now. I don't know how that happened, but
We just like hearing you talk, Dave.
well, I am in the minority in that group, but I don't know. It's just follow challenged. I'll put it that way. We talked about a number of different things, 4 or 5 really neat items, but the one that we brought Deanna in for, actually there were 2, but one of them was that her analysis was done on 7 years, and we wanted to know if there was a magical formula for years, or could it create. We'll kind of see what's going on, and I'll pass it on to Deanna.
Deanna, did you hear that question?
It was a little breaking up there, but from my conversation when I was in that group, the question was about the time frame of the referendum and how was 7 years chosen, and really it's just kind of been our standard length of time, somewhere 6 to 7 years on a bond. We want to avoid going out to the voters more frequently. It costs a lot of money to have a bond referendum and election, so we try to minimize that. But we can definitely calculate impacts on the tax rate and the amount of issuance under both a shorter term or even a longer term.
Dave, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Kathy's table number 9.
Kathy is not at table 9. Tangela is at table 9.
Okay,
We didn't have any community members in our group. We had all staff members in our group.
were those staff members part of the committee?
So we have one that was a part of the committee, then myself as a facilitator, and one was the scribe, and he didn't have any questions.
Okay,
that.
okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Okay, let's go to table 6, and that's Nicole, I believe.
Yes, so our group didn't have any questions either. We definitely looked at the different priorities and then really had a lot of conversation about how the taxpayers and the presentation. And so that was very interesting. So Ms. Gimby's going to just give us a quick little overview from our discussion.
Good, good, thank you.
Yes, thank you. We were just mentioned during the discussion that I called to our attention the fact that we are moving to technology, the priorities in technology to the #1 priority due to the pandemic and everything that we have experienced. So basically, we wanted to move forward on that topic, not trying to wash away the importance of all the other ones, but just realizing how basic is that we have to have all our kids with the skills and equipment in order to provide or teachers as well, teachers and students with all those tools. And on the other hand, all the other priorities that we saw, we wish that we could do that, but it was really very interested about that. Ms. Wentz was mentioned about the taxpayers and so on, and the tax increase that we have. It could be awesome if we can start from a standpoint on the option number 2 that she mentioned about the taxes, something that I think that it can be a little bit comfortable for everybody, and we can cover, if not all, at least most of them, and then we can move on from that one. Definitely not taking back that we consider important as well all the arts part, the equipment, the safety, and obviously not to let it back the buildings, the major renovations that we have in those buildings that are 50 years plus or 40 plus years old, and we need to do something about it. So it was really very nice discussion about all this, and hopefully we could get all the money to get the cherry on top of the cake, everything. That's what we all want, everything, and moving the agriculture center to priority #1. But yes, that's a personal wish, but yes, everything that we can do is going to be great, and the effort that everybody's doing is amazing. So hopefully we can do something good about it. Is what we have. I'm really proud of everyone. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, let's hear, excuse me, let's hear from table 5. I think that is that Jennifer.
Yes, and Sharon was elected to be our speaker tonight.
Good, thanks, Sharon.
Hello, everyone. We did talk about everything, and a lot of the things that are on this list, we agree with the top priority, but we did have 2 questions that we did want to ask concerning. For one, it was about the security. I understand that they're stating that they want to put up the wrought iron fencing, and we, as parents, consider that looked a little bit prison-y type. I mean, is there anything else that they could come up with, like for beautification of like securing the buildings versus it, people driving by seeing a school with wrought iron fencing, and it's like, oh, is that a school or is it a prison? So I felt like that could be addressed, and maybe like if we could try to come up with some type of different, like fencing that doesn't look prison type. And another question we had was, how are we going to try to organize to get the information out to get the voters to come and vote on these bonds? Like are we able to go out and like hand out flyers? Like, can we organize something? Because a lot of people, like we discussed, even I was one, when bonds came up for the school, wasn't really interested in it. Everyone's really interested in just voting for mayor or governor. And I mean, our kids are in these school districts. We need to vote on certain things to help out. Like I was telling everyone, I've gone to other school districts because my daughter plays basketball. And I can see that their communities come together, and we need A-Leaf. I mean, it's our community. We got to take care of it. So.
Sharon, you're like a committee member that we'd like to clone. That's always our hope, is that people will come in and not ever having thought about a bond, and all of a sudden you're an expert in this and people are going to be asking you questions. So thank you for that. Craig, do you want to talk about that piece of her question first, and then I'll direct the fencing question to Jeff?
Yes, and Kimberly Smith's on this call. She can jump in at any moment. There will be a coordinated marketing effort to get the word out to voters of all ages. Like last bond, we had multiple speakers bureaus going out to different targeted audiences to spread the word, and we leave behind materials to disseminate amongst those particular groups, those particular block parties, those particular groups of neighborhood associations. So that's a great question, and yes, that will be, we'll probably ask you to help us distribute those materials.
Sharon, we're before this is all over, Craig and his group and others will equip this committee with every piece of information that you need to answer questions that are asked of you, and even to convince your neighbors and friends that that they need to vote for this bond. Jeff, do you want to talk about that wrought iron fencing, or is someone else to do that?
I missed part of the question. She was sort of cutting out a little bit. What was the question about the wrought iron fence?
Sorry.
No, go on, Sharon, you tell him.
Is there any type of securing that we could use other than the wrought iron fencing? So it doesn't look so prison type, like that. As parents, you know, we're kind of concerned about that.
Can I add?
I guess.
Well, Annie, yeah, go ahead.
So if I can just add, it's more like beautification of it, not just being a iron fence, but actual, you know, some architecture design is considered for the beautification of the community, especially since you're considering covering the school bus area that a lot of people come by, and it gives an impression of what the district's about. I would just like to see a beautification project, not just consider it as security, but also making our district look more beautiful.
Okay, Jeff, do you want to speak to that as well?
Well, I guess beauty's in the eye of the beholder a little bit, because when we use the wrought iron, we do that because it's considered a far nicer look than the chain link fences that we have around the district. So in us, that is an aesthetic upgrade.
It's not good enough though. It's better than chain link, but it's still not I feel that the community deserves better.
I'll have to let Hilda or Mr. Woods answer that again, because that's been our thought, that it was a big upgrade already.
Annie, are you talking about specific fencing that already exists that you think is unsightly?
If you drive around the Career Center building, the front of the Career Center building on Richmond is beautiful, but on the side, I have taken clients to Phoenicia's, clients from Shell, clients from big corporations. They're like, oh my God, what is that, a prison? I'm like, no, actually that's a school. That's a brand new school that's just created. And and it's not just, you know, these people are from all over the world. On the side of the building where the iron fencing is, and also because of the I guess the divots or whatever that you guys have, those ditches back there, it looks impending instead of welcoming. It doesn't look like a school. Even colleges that have iron gates around them, they do so with you know, landscaping. They do it with brick columns. They have something, again, that adds an element of, and I understand what you're saying, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. There's like different levels of taste in class. I'm saying bring it up for a leaf. That's it. That's really what I'm saying. I think you guys are clear on what I mean by that. The iron fence is not good enough.
Yeah,
Maybe we better go back to the table with some more pricing. Right, right, Jeff?
I think that there can be some design elements to the fence other than just a standard wrought iron fence. The reason it was proposed for transportation was because of we actually have had so much criminal mischief of the chain link fence over the years, and they degrade so quickly. But we have had some fences where we've had some art areas, you know, where we could put pictures and so forth, and then there's fencing that can be utilized slats in a decorative manner, along with some landscaping. And then she brings up a good point about transportation is a perfect example of there's zero landscaping. And it's just because of the nature of the facility, we're using every square inch, but we could look at carving out and putting some trees and things in the lot.
And I
Okay,
love
thank
the
you,
idea.
Mr. Woods.
If I could
Let's
just add
move,
sorry, Michelle, real quick, sorry. If we did like tiles, something with like children's artwork, like you see in some other neighborhoods, and we really use the beauty of the community, I would love that. I think that would be beautiful to have for A-Leaf.
great design ideas, Ani. Let's move to table 4. And I think, was that Marla? Okay, Marla, how about it? Table 4.
Yes, tonight we were the Fantastic Four because we had a lot of great discussion, and Miss Grace is going to bring one of the main questions that came from our table. So I will turn it over to Grace.
Good evening. The question that we had was if there'll be an opportunity for the committee members to take field trips to the facilities that are going to be impacted by these projects, as in the prior bonds.
Oh, Grace, that's a great question. How we would love that. And I'll direct that to Charles to answer this. Is there a possibility of site visits?
There is. We discussed that from the standpoint of COVID early on, that what we would try to do is do some virtual visits where we kind of made a film of like walking in the shoes of somebody going to that facility. And so there's 2 ways we could do it. We could do a true in-person visit and try to do it as carefully as we could for those who want to participate. But we could also do it as a virtual, if we kind of knew which ones especially you guys wanted to see, that we could target those visits, and so we don't waste time looking at things that nobody really is that interested in. So I'm open to do it either way.
Grace, let us examine the possibilities of that in the light of the environment that we're in, and let the district decide if they can do that safely with a large committee. Is that okay, an answer for you?
Yes, I think it will be for our table. Yeah, I was just a spokesperson.
Thank you, Grace.
It sounds good. Sounds good to me.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you, I know I took some follow-up questions, but on the first round, when we're going through the tables, if I can just go through the tables with no follow-up questions or comments until we're through, and then if we have time, we'll back up and do it again. So let me go to table 1, and that's Daryl's table.
Yes, good evening. Ms. Malik is our spokesperson for tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Malik.
Hello, thank you. Stop it. Stop it. Our question for stop it. I'm so sorry. Our question as a group was in regard to Ewens and Chambers. Just from the presentation this evening, it appears that it's already been decided that Chambers is going to be torn down and rebuilt. And we just wanted to know where the decision-making process was in terms of Ewens, whether it was just going to be renovated or if it was going to be torn down and rebuilt. I know that there are some historical aspects in Ewens that are wanting to be preserved. So we were wondering if there still hasn't been a decision made for that campus or what was going on.
Mr. Wood, shall I direct that to Mr. Alloway and Mr. Delisle, or did you want to answer that?
Well, just in general terms, since we last talked, I think we have to get started on these older facilities now. But as far as long-term, the longevity of facilities, they're being renovated versus bulldozed and rebuilt, let's say. That is something we're going to engage, I think, the bond review committee, which will automatically, after this bond referendum is put before the voters, we're going to begin a process of bringing back the bond steering committee as a bond review committee, where each year we meet twice at least and go over all the projects that we've completed that year. Well, part of that process is we're going to help develop a building replacement renovation plan that we can utilize on all of our facilities. On the one about Ewens, I think we're still in the pricing. It could go either way with what pricing was put in there. It's probably going to be a little more expensive to do the bulldozing of the school, but there's been enough, I think, outcry to include the elements of the original building as from a historical standpoint, that I think that's clear that that's the option that we're going to have to go with, is some sort of a significant renovation that provides a classroom experience and size that we've had. We actually addressed in the last referendum the library expansion at Ewens because it was smaller than the others. And that being downtown Alief, the first elementary, the oldest elementary, that is not something that's going to be popular to bulldoze and replace. It does have good bones, as I think was said by a number of folks. So I think we're leaning towards a renovation, a significant renovation of that, which would require a swing school or a location where the students can go while the school is being worked on, or portions of the school are being worked on. So either way is very expensive, but I think we're set on, we've got to work on Ewens and Chambers, and then age-wise ongoing, we're going to develop a plan of do we just modify the fronts of the facade of the building, of the front of the building, or do major renovations inside, or bulldoze the school and rebuild. And that's what we're going to need long-term help on, is those next batch of 40-year plus old schools.
Okay, let's move to table 2, and that's Sean.
And I'm taking Sean's place today, Michelle. And Anna
Oh,
Shaw.
I'm sorry, Patty. I didn't realize that. Thank you.
No worries. Anna Shaw is going to speak for our group.
So we actually had a question that was very similar to Sharon Williams' question. When we're talking about security at the schools, we don't necessarily feel like it always has to be from the point of view of keeping people out. It can also be from the point of view of accessibility, specifically things like having cameras at the front door, so the front receptionist can see who's coming in and they can buzz them in. Because what happens right now is that every school, you can't see who's at the front door, and sometimes parents or staff members are stuck at the front door and nobody can let them in. So we can put in layers of security while also selling it as accessibility to the building itself.
Great point. Was there a question attached to that, Anna, or that was a comment from your group?
That was a comment.
Okay, good. That's perfect. I just didn't want to miss anything if we needed to have an expert weigh in. Shall we move to table number 3? And I hope that's Shannon.
It is. So Mr. Aaron Burgess is going to be our speaker again. And I believe we have a question about security as well.
Okay, Aaron, let's hear it.
Yes, this was in regards to the expense chart, line item SS9, which was labeled secure entrances. I was just wondering if someone could go over that, exactly what all that entails once more real quick, and just why it was decided that that is a priority 2 as opposed to securing the cafeterias and the libraries, which is considered a priority 1. You naturally you think the main entrance would be a main priority.
Good question, Aaron. Who's answering our safety and security questions tonight? Craig?
I can answer it. On that, the entrances have already been secured to our buildings. I think that entrance, without looking at that sheet, I don't have it in front of me. Some of those entrances were going into the second, like for instance, the one off the top of my head is for the middle schools where we have a second floor where the staircases are going up to the second floor. It adds another layer.
Charles, we're not,
of
you're breaking up on
security
mine. Is
to
everybody
that, to
hearing
where
him or is?
a intruder. And
They're
then
not,
the
we're
ones
not
that we've
hearing you.
identified are currently open.
I couldn't hear him. Could anybody hear him that no one?
Glenn, you were breaking up real bad the last minute or so of what your comments were.
Yeah, I'm sorry. My signal's way down right now.
Okay.
Was the question specifically about SS9?
Yes.
Okay, so SS9 has to do with the cross corridor walls. So there are some schools that do not have, the pods don't have a corridor secured. You got a main corridor goes around and that's secured, but then there's sub corridors into the classroom pods. And so that's what SS9 is to add walls and doors and stuff into those particular schools that don't have that.
Aaron, does that answer your question?
Well,
But Aaron,
just-
some of those, I'll add on to some of those areas, like let's say Albright or Holland, when you go in and you can immediately, maybe if someone was to go through the security level. Now, you remember, we have a front entrance that is secure, but if for some reason they got through the front entrance, a place like Albright where you could go immediately upstairs. If we were in a lockdown situation, Dan, you can add here, you have doors upstairs that automatically lock. So they would be locked. So an intruder could be stopped right there, as opposed to going a couple of feet down and entering into an open cafeteria, potentially full of kids, that has no doors, no anything that can lock and secure the cafeteria. So that's kind of why the cafeterias in some of our libraries are put first. Because some of these cross corridors, when you go upstairs or get into it, they have other doors that automatically lock in place. So to me, that's the way I looked at it. That's why the security of the cafeterias and the libraries that are wide open may be more of a priority 1 as opposed to a priority 2. Is that how you see it, Glenn or Dan? You can add?
Yes, and part of that, if you can hear me, part of that reasoning too is a little bit different than Michelle's ranking. In other words, it's more in line with the year we would plan on doing it as well, is one reason why they're a 2 versus a 1, because we couldn't do it all in the first year.
Was that okay, Aaron?
Yeah, I'll save any follow-up questions.
Well, the priorities they only function as long as we are presenting the projects. Once the committee starts making decisions, everything that makes the bond becomes a priority 1. So if you chose that priority 2, it wouldn't matter that it was a 2 unless you were going to eliminate all the 2s. If this committee selects that, it just moves into the bundle of priority 1s. So don't worry too much about where that's placed.
Michelle,
Let me move quick.
can I, so we do have a few extra minutes today. I just want to.
Charles, I still have table 7 that I haven't heard from. do you want to talk before they do, or do you want to wait
Yeah,
until
I
they're
just,
through?
because security's come up a number of times. I just
Okay.
want everybody to know a little more about the historical context. And, 20 years ago, we didn't do this. We didn't put more doors and more walls and locks on doors and things inside the buildings. And consequently, also, we didn't put a lot of fencing around the perimeters of schools either. And a lot of that was driven off of these mass shooting events, and that, the people that the parents that are sending their kids, and then the employees and their families know where the vulnerable spots are. And so they've lived with these different layers of security in these buildings. And so they've come back time and time again and said, okay, look, this is great, except we're all sitting ducks sitting here in the cafeteria because there's nothing stopping somebody from coming right in here and taking, their way with it. So I would agree with you that anything security related is really a priority one. And I think what Glenn was trying to say is that they've tried to separate them and say, okay, if we only could do one, then this is the most important. This is where we've heard the most from staff and from people that work and live in those buildings. So other than that, I can give you the advice of, from our perspective, all of the security items for campuses are high priority. I mean, that's what we're in the business to do, is to protect people that come to school and be safe. So
Thank you, Mr. Woods. Okay, may I move quickly to table 7? Carla, that's your table, and who's talking?
Yes, most of our conversation, well, not most, but some of it dealt with voting, and I think those questions have been answered. So I'm going to pivot, and she's not expecting it, but Lakeisha Cecil, would you mind sharing your question that dealt with the sound amplification system and students with disabilities?
Oh, the question is, how can that system be more beneficial, and how, is there any relation to those students, our ADA students, students with challenging behaviors, and of the likes? How would the amplification system really benefit those as well?
Thank you, Lakeisha. Pam, can you answer that question for us?
Absolutely. And according to the research that's been posted on our website, in terms of what students hear, the sound amplification system is definitely part of the classroom of the future. It really allows every single student to hear the speaker as if the speaker was standing right next to them. For our students with special needs or students with hearing disabilities that require sound amplification systems, their technology would plug right into the back of the system, and the teacher's voice or the speaker's voice would be amplified through that wireless microphone. So we know that there are ambient sounds or background noise that impact what our learners hear, from the ventilation system to the sound in the classroom, to the sound on the playground, to the sound of the hallway. The amplification system would really make those speakers accessible to all students. And we know that we have multiple districts across our region that that is standard equipment in those classrooms. And we want all students to be able to hear as if they were standing right next to the speaker.
Ms. Lowe, can I add to that, just as a teacher who actually uses that technology?
Please, please.
So I'm a teacher over at the ALU Center for Advanced Careers, and I have students who have ADHD and also ADD. And when we get into building computers and getting into projects, it's impossible to hear me when we have those, when we have a bunch of kids moving around and working on their projects, and all classrooms are moving towards action-based learning. It puts a lot of kids at a disadvantage if they can't hear me, especially when it's time to leave or if there's something critical that's happening. And so with that sound amplification system, we've been able to make sure that all students can actually hear us, because we get them to a point where everybody is quiet using that system, and then we're able to speak then. But without it, you're basically yelling, and you have to walk up to every student and kind of tap them. So it would be a real issue if there was something like a fire drill or something like that that was happening.
Thank you, Anna. Okay, I hate to cut off the discussion. I'd love for us to just have some free time. I call the administrators and the people that I deal with at this district, the A team, and I can tell from tonight and the comments you've made and the your grasp of the content of a bond referendum that I may have to expand that definition to include this committee. You're just amazing, and I congratulate you. You have almost a full month from now until June 10th when you come back for your big meeting. And that's when you're going to actually make decisions from that worksheet that you have, minus that little bitty $16.5 million mistake. We're going to correct that for you and send you a new one. And when you get it, throw away everything else that you have and let's just work from the corrected worksheet. Hilda's so upset about that, she'll probably have it to you tonight. But
Michelle, let me just break in a minute. There's no additional, it was just needed to slide over. It did not impact the total amount. We're good.
oh, aren't we happy about that?
We're good.
Yay. Okay, so that, I don't know what that meant, but I know she's going to slide it over and send it to you.
It's in the wrong cell. It was in the wrong.
Okay, so
Accounting has verified that the total is correct. And some
Yeah,
of you
she's
might
gonna-
have heard me banging on my adding machine here.
she's going to, you can verify that it is correct, Deanna? Is that what
Total
you
is
said?
correct.
Okay, that came from Deanna, the financial wizard, so you can be sure that it's correct. So here's what I want you to do between now and when you come back on June 10th. Look at that thing and look at it 30,000 feet and then look at it at 3 feet and see those projects that you think are absolutely essential. You may look at it in terms of, I really don't care how many of this they do or that they do. I just want all those priority ones in the bond. I want all the priority twos. You may be even one of those that says, I want all priority threes in there too. So I just want you to start forming some opinions about it. When you come back on June 10th, you're going to work through that sheet and actually make decisions on each of those pieces. According to our decision-making model, when the basic is 2/3 of the groups, this is an electoral college, you're going to hate it, but that's how we're going to work it. We're not doing it individually. We're doing it by your groups, so that when 2/3 of those groups come in on one of those line items, or yes, line items, when you come in with that, once we reach a 2/3 majority, that goes into the bond. That's our decision-making model, but we don't like 2/3. We want at least an 80%, and we would really prefer consensus on everything, but we may not get that. So you've got all that time to look at it. Don't wait until 2 or 3 days before, because it's complicated and it's going to take some critical thinking for you to decide on those things. If you have any questions, you've got my email, you've got my cell phone. I'll be out. I'm going to Yellowstone from the 23rd through the 29th, but you can email me or text me anytime before or after that. And I don't think I'll have good reception in Yellowstone, but you can text me or email me and I'll answer any question. But Hilda knows everything, and so does Craig, so you can email them as well. Ed is available to you as well. He's on the committee with you. So just get ready to have some fun, because A-Leaf kids deserve your best work. So is there anything? Oh, I need to tell you, Mr. Chambers was sitting in traffic, trying his best to get to you. I think he was in Austin doing some of that business up there, but he really regrets that he could not make it, but he did text us and tell us that he was caught in traffic. So, and you know what that's like. So good night, everybody. Hilda, do you want to say something before we stop? No,
I'm good.
You're
Thank
good.
you.
Okay, A-Team, get after it and come back ready. Good night.